So in 2002, Los Angeles alone spent $15 million printing several language packets for the election. I think that if we cut all of those packets except for English, we would save so much money. So what do you guys think?
Even if you cut the English packet to just English packets, Mr. Trump, the thing is, you're going to have people here in America who even that showed up legally have trouble reading all English things.
Yes, but we can use that money to go to translators to teach more than just one person. We can have classrooms filled. We can use that $15 million to teach these immigrants English, and we can just set up these schools for students, and at night time, when the immigrants want to learn English, then they can come learn English.
Would that not cost more money over time? Up front, you're printing out these packets, which get printed out every couple of years for people to do elections. And at the same time, you're talking about translators. You have to pay every day, every week, every month, every year to translate for these people. Taxes would go up. You'd have to fund all revenue into that, and that might end up costing you more because, like I said, once again, it was printed one time every couple of years versus every week cutting a paycheck for translators in every state.
But to piggyback off that, Monica, the CEO of TheHill.com, states he is an immigrant himself and he spoke Spanish. He came here and he said that learning English and understanding English was the most important asset that he as an immigrant and other immigrants should have, because it allows him to assimilate into the culture and therefore no longer have the lack of job opportunities and the lack of I don't know how to say it other than that. He just says it allows him to assimilate to the culture better. And he now speaks 5 languages, Spanish being his first and then English being his second. He is learning more languages, and it's, like he said, one of the most important assets, because as a country, if we don't have something that ties us together, we become divided.
Right, but that
Now, Curtis, do you really believe that when you were at the back of the train, did you learn other languages to communicate?
Yes, I understood that culture and heritage was important, but if we can't unify, then we can't fight the higher powers. If we don't understand what the government is oppressing us with, then we can't fight it. We can't have our own voice.
I'm not talking about abandoning your culture. I'm just talking about assimilating with the United States and learning English. I'm not talking you have to abandon your whole culture, though.
Well, I've already taken English classes and I understand English. I can speak English, but I would also prefer to read something in my own language.
Currently, Canada tends to 2 languages. They tend to French and they tend to English. Quebec is all French, and they spend billions of dollars each year tending to each language. So we spend billions of dollars. They spend billions of dollars just to tend to those 2 languages that they can spend.
But accommodating for other languages means that more people will be welcome into our country, and it will improve our money circulation throughout the economy, because there will be more jobs available, and it'll be friendlier. It'll be a friendlier environment. That's why it's a melting pot. Like, we have different cultures because we were inviting to them, and yes, they should, there should be a balance. Like, she knows both languages, but she also wants to read in her native tongue. I can understand that. That's a comfort thing.
We're not talking about coming to America just to get jobs. We're talking about trying to government communications, applying for visas, applying for citizenship, applying for the healthcare. Jobs, unless it's a government job, we wouldn't be asking the employers to put their packets in English. Of course, they would have to put their tax packets in English, like the W-4s, all of that. But we're not asking for the employees themselves put your application process in English, unless it's a government job.
Okay, so if we put tax forms in English, what if someone who took English classes but can't read English extremely well? What if someone goes to fill out their tax information, they do it all wrong? Now they have to be fined because your government says, hey, you didn't learn enough English, you're being fined for doing your taxes incorrectly, or for evading taxes, or any implication that comes with taxes that can get you in trouble. Lord knows there's thousands of them in the government.
Well,
that goes off the assimilation. If you create a situation in which they must learn English, sure, for the first while it's going to be difficult, but allowing them to learn English, as I said earlier, allows for the community as a whole. And the lack of job opportunities because people don't speak English properly or correctly or whatever you want to say, they have trouble assimilating, and therefore they have trouble getting jobs, they have trouble with education. 90% of the world has an official language. Of that 90%, half of them declare English.
But if you look at the makeup of a country, even countries around the world have multiple languages, multiple races and ethnicities, and they all speak different languages. America was built on freedom, and even with people, as I've stated, coming here, there's some people who don't have the capacity to learn English. I mean, we have
What do you
children.
mean by capacity?
We have children here in America now who are raised around English but struggle learning the English language as a whole. It's a very difficult language to
Is that
understand.
because we spend too much money printing out 7 different copies?
They're not speaking Spanish.
What are they speaking?
They're speaking English. It's just poor English.
That's what I said. Is that because we're spending too much money printing out 7 different copies of the same ballot rather than spending money to learn English?
If you spent all that money printing all those ballots, how come none of the people who speak English, none of these children are speaking any of those languages? It doesn't affect the children.
So they're speaking a broken English and not their language either. So how does that not affect the assimilation level?
To go off of the capacity that he brought up, myself and thousands of other women like me are forced to come here and to marry an American. I don't speak English, and I'm being forced to stay in the house with my husband and raise a family. How am I supposed to learn English and the thousands of other women like me?
You're forced to stay in your house because you don't speak English, and therefore your only option is
I'm
to stay
saying
in
I
your
don't
house.
have the capacity. How he wants to
What do you mean you don't
hire
have the capacity?
translators. How he wants to hire translators and be able to teach all the immigrants. There are many people in a situation, immigrants, who could not get to where I could learn how to learn English.
In other words, what she's saying is because she doesn't know English, she's a slave to
have
her household
resources.
because she doesn't have the resources to get out and go,
Yes,
hey,
I don't have
need
the
to learn.
resources to get to where he wants to have this picture perfect plan of everyone learning English.
Even if she
Right.
does have the resources to get there, it's still going to take time. How much you have to spend for the pamphlets, you still have to spend for the teachers, and then you also have to spend the time for these people to learn English. So for the meantime, you do need another method that helps them understand government documents for that moment until they do end up being fluent in the language.
We are taking, like, in a sense that if you limit, like, okay, if we have only English as our primary government source, that means that everything's going to be recorded in English as well. They're not going to make accommodations. So that means everyone's going to be left behind.
They have certain accommodations
But
for
people are-
public
You
health
could
and
you could
safety.
hire a
Left
translator
behind.
though.
Public health and safety they have
What if we
accommodations for
don't have
public
that
health and
money to
safety.
hire a translator?
Hmm?
What if we're still trying to get on our feet and I don't have the funds to?
Well, the money that goes from printing those pamphlets will be going to paying for the translators.
So the government would provide
Yes.
a translator to everybody, every single
No,
person.
it would be provided in a school setting where you would have to go yourself to that translator and learn English.
Okay, so when these immigrants are learning English, no matter what country they're coming from, they don't have the information, the know-how of English to fill out tax information and other legal documentation for a job. Also, they don't speak enough English at this point because they're going to translators to learn English to hold an English-speaking job in an English-speaking country. So who's going to pay for their housing, their food, their electricity, their, how they're going to get to school, the school itself? Is the government going to fund all of that? Because you're looking at having to fund millions of immigrants a year.
So what about the immigrants that come here and they literally don't assimilate into our culture? They speak and move within Spanish cultures and they just move from you're saying that's fine.
Even if you make this an American-only type thing, there's still going to be people who do that. It's like we have laws, but we have criminals. Criminals don't care about laws. People who don't want to assimilate to English don't care about your laws for assimilating to English, because you can't go around knocking on people's doors to see if they speak English and then shipping them out of the country if they don't speak English. That would be a waste of
We're not
resources and
talking
time.
about shipping them out of the country. You're talking about shipping them out of the country if they don't speak English. We're not talking about that. We're trying to help them.
I would like to bring up a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. Any man who says that he is an American but something else also is not an American at all. We have room for one flag, the American flag. We have room for one language here, and that is the English language. And we have room for but one sole loyalty, and that is loyalty to the American people.
I will say this. I also have a quote to counteract too from Angie Mahwang. People already understand the importance of English. We don't need to shove it down their throats.
What's her credibility?
I'm pretty sure she has a PhD. But yeah, I mean, like even as we were discussing before, it's a lingua franca. We understand that it has certain business, specialities, and it's very important in that aspect. But I would say like in certain circumstances, such as like we have like refugees and all that stuff coming in too, and if you're going to make that an official language, as we were discussing before, documentation, it would kind of interfere with even like everyday lives of these refugees and immigrants, because you have documentation such as like driver's licenses and building permits, and if they can't understand that, then they're not going to be able to function and they're not going to be able to support themselves in America. And that'll actually like have a negative impact on our economy, because now they're living here but they have no job.
Okay, so what if I feel like this idea of everything in the government being in English could lead to corruption. Although I'm gonna go to school and learn English, that's gonna be just day-to-day communications. Hello, how are you? My name is Rosa. But when I wanna go do legal papers, I'm obviously going to need a translator provided by the government, so that they work for the government. So whatever, I don't know what I could be signing off on. This is a legal contract that I would otherwise be reading if I could read it in my own language and understand it completely. But if I have somebody just telling me, yeah, this is what it says, yeah, go ahead, sign that, you're good, I could be signing off on something that I don't consent on.
Right, corruption like that takes place even between language and like English and English. I mean, they try to trick you into signing something. Oh, don't read this. It says this. Just sign it before you read it. And you're like, okay. And next thing you know, you signed off your name to some crazy bank account that you're gonna like.
Yeah, I could have signed off
That was
something.
in
Assets
fine
I have.
print, as it's
Yeah,
here
like
in America
fine
so
print.
often.
Okay, so it seems as though this conversation can't be solved in one sitting, as there are pros and cons to both sides. So let's just let's meet up another time and see if we can discuss further.